And here we go again for another week of Tuesday Night Live, and I'll hand you straight over to our host, Peter J. How you going, Pete?
Hey Felix, how you going? Thanks very much for that, and welcome everybody to another Tuesday Night Live edition of the Adelaide Crows Crowcast. Great to have you along, everybody, tonight, and I'm your host this evening, Peter J, and it's just me and a glass of rare breed and Coke. And speaking of rare breeds, we've got, of course, the usual panel with us tonight. We've got Macca, Nikki, and Dennis. How are you guys?
Very well, thanks.
Quietly pleased with some news you're possibly going to announce shortly?
Yes, I'm going to get in there for a little bit of news tonight. I think we'll do the right thing, though, and we'll honour Phoenix's technical support and let him know that we're about to launch into Nikki's news for another week. Yes, thanks for the cock-wombling news of the week. Nikki,
Sorry.
I couldn't let it go, mate. You know that I couldn't let it go.
Bastard.
Nikki, I'll just jump in. There was a little bit of breaking news this evening, apparently on Channel 7. I've only just caught up with it on the Big Footy boards, but apparently there was some initial announcement there that the Brad Crouch deal has been done and that he will be staying in Adelaide for, I think, they're looking at 2 years, I think was the years mentioned, and that it will be announced prior to the finals taking place. So it hasn't been confirmed by the club, of course, but it is breaking on Channel 7. So I think we can say that is, if they've gone with that, then that's a reasonable chance of coming off. And if that's the case, absolutely brilliant news that they will have signed Brad Crouch. That will give the trio of Daniel Talia, Josh Jenkins and Brad Crouch as being retained this year. And that is a fantastic job by the List Management Committee.
Totally agree. Absolutely delightful news. And I know at this stage it's more rumour than actual fact, but as you said, it's most likely will be true. And I guess I speak for everybody that likes the Crows colours. I'm absolutely thrilled to hear it.
For me, that it was broken on Channel 7 because they're the ones who kind of had the news regarding Jenkins and Talia and Smith before it came out from the club. So there's a bit of form from them that makes us feel quite confident.
So who at Channel 7 has inside word with the Crows? Is that
I'm trying to remember
Shuttleworth connection, maybe?
Could possibly be.
I'm not sure. It was certainly noted that there was nothing reported on Channel 9 tonight. Treaders was silent on this, so it definitely hasn't come from Channel 9. It's only one source at the moment. But it's good news, so we're going to go with it.
It's a really good result for all the parties involved, I think, because it gives us some security. It gives Brad a bit of time to get himself set in the side, and then in a couple of years' time, he can go for the big contract.
Yep, and the interesting thing about that, of course, is the fact that if they have Brad secured now and they know exactly all the guns that have been retained, there'll be a ripple effect going down towards the other players that haven't signed it, and it'll enable the club to work out who stays and who goes, and because I think they were waiting on the Brad Crouch situation.
As Vardy Magic just pointed out on the chat, Shuttleworth was Channel 10, not Channel 7.
Well, in any event, it's terrific news. So that's something that we can certainly celebrate, and it will be a very, very good thing to have that out of the way before finals, because that was just something that was hanging over the club, and there was obviously the usual agitation that was coming from those sections of the media who tend to, shall we say, favour the Port Power side of things a little bit more. So there was certainly some agitation about it, and it is great that we've been able to retain all three of those guys, not just Brad Crouch, but Jenkins and Talia as well. Let's not forget that Talia signed very, very early, but he was also a major issue. So, yeah, terrific stuff.
And just moving on, whilst we've got signings, the other thing that generally happens around this time of the year is people announcing their retirements. So last week we had Andrew Walker, where Carlton put up a pathetic effort in order to honour him off. But Jamison from the Blues has also now announced his retirement, and Xavier Ellis, who's now with West Coast but a former premiership player with Hawthorn, his body apparently has gotten the better of him. And the other thing to come out of the weekend is that Brisbane finally are actually going to do a review of their coaching department. I think the rest of us wonder what took them so long.
Hang on.
I always laugh when news like that comes out, because why are they not consistently internally reviewing what's happening?
Well,
they need to do some sort of, this is out there in the public now. We're going to do a proper review. Well, maybe you should have been doing that the whole time.
Yeah, but I think that they've probably got to examine areas that they probably haven't been to before, and such things as resources as well, to get more money out of the AFL, who have said they will give more money. The coaching thing, I expressed my views very clearly on that on Sunday, and I had a couple of objectors, but I still say he won't be there next year.
I think there has to be some massive changes going on at the Brisbane Lions for them to actually attract a quality coach. I think we've started to hear really what a lot of the issues are. And as was pointed out on the board quite succinctly, is that they used to be able to rely on the AFL for some support to help them go in that market, because they did need it. But then sustained pressure from Victorian clubs, and one loudmouth in particular, President, had it removed, and then they made the stupid decision of bringing in Gold Coast and GWS and propping them up instead, and Brisbane have quite rightly fallen in a heap. And I can kind of understand why that has occurred. They should have done a few things better, I think we can quite rightly say, but overall, the AFL has a lot to answer for for the state that Brisbane are currently in.
McLaughlin was on in the Channel 9 news. McLaughlin was saying that he anticipates and expects that Brisbane will be applying for a priority pick, and that will be considered by the AFL. So I thought with that statement, he almost invited them to do that. And because they must be really big and very concerned about the pathetic effort that Brisbane is putting up, and the fact that players like Rockcliffe and Zorko and Hanley, they're not even giving as much as they should be giving. And to some degree, the players do look like they've given up. And that's why I think this coach will go, and somebody like Brett Ratton will go up there.
I think that Lepich will stay. I think he'll retain his job. I think that, in my view, nothing gets the AFL's attention like 3 or 4 100-point losses. Are they tanking? No, I'm not suggesting that at all, but I don't think that I think it suits Brisbane's agenda to be as bad as they possibly can be, and this is where we start then seeing jockeying for priority draft picks, for extra funding, all of this type of thing. So I think that Leicester will be safe, and I think that it suits Brisbane's agenda to be as bad as what they are.
Now, Peter,
is that tanking? I'm not sure.
Now, Peter, you're going to get red carded in a minute if you don't get that mic cord under control.
Is that better?
He's gone silent now. Yay!
That's
Sorry.
better. I'll get
You were
back in my
very
box now.
rustly.
So I think
the other thing.
I think he'll be safe.
Does anybody agree with me I'm saying outright he's going to go? And does anybody agree with me? Am I the only one here who really thinks that? That a coach that's taken him backwards at 100 mile an hour over the 3 years he's been there, and has got players that are definitely not behind him, in my opinion. I think there will be changes made. There has to be.
I sort of agree with you, Macca. I think the way that the AFL is at the moment, and has been for the last 10, 15 years, is that when a team isn't performing how expectations would have them perform, the coach is the first person to go. And when he's talking in his press conference like he was after the game, it was almost like he was, I can't think of the words, like he'd given in already, like he was
Resigned?
expecting this is. No, I don't think he will resign. I think he'll be given the sack because that way he'll get his payout.
No, I think Nicky means resign to being sacked.
Oh yes, resigned to his tenure being up. Yep.
I got the same impression as you did. It was actually quite a weird speech, in my opinion. He's made a couple of weird speeches in the last couple of weeks because he's under massive pressure. But unfortunately for him, and he could be the greatest guy on earth, but I don't think he's got the answers as the coach, and that's what it's all about.
Well, that may well be the case. And speaking of other coaches, that I don't know how this bloke gets under the radar, but how on earth is there not more pressure on Ken Hinkley? And I know that I certainly have deep-seated psychological issues when it comes to Port Adelaide, and I do get counselling, but even so, even allowing for all of that, how in the hell does Ken Hinkley escape the kind of scrutiny that other coaches get, particularly in this city, with the kind of performances that Port Adelaide have been putting up over the last 2 years, if you don't mind?
Excellent point. He has got away with blue bloody murder in the last couple of years in terms of the way the press has treated him, because one of the reasons for that is that we have our biased leader of the Advertiser, and then you've got Kane Corns, etc. There's too many poor people in the media for my liking, and I think they've been very gentle on him, quite frankly, because I can't quite decipher their game plan, and they've got some players that give in. Hinkley says we will never ever give up. Well, they do.
They've got, in terms of playing personnel, they've got the midfield that took them to within a kick of a grand final. They've got that midfield. They've added Dixon. Now, okay, they've lost Ryder, but they've added Dixon to that side. They've got a couple of injuries, but not to really keep. Apart from probably Homsch, and I'd reckon. I think they made the point on radio through the week that really there are only two players that will go into that side that will make a huge difference, and that'll be Homsch, who I respect and admire as an excellent player, and Ryder. Now, apart from those two, who have they got realistically to come back into that side that is going to make a huge difference? Guys like White and Pollock are playing reserves. It is a mess down there, and they have the same playing personnel as they did 2 years ago. So all this, bullshit that they, carrying on about injuries and all the rest of it, it's rubbish. There is something wrong down there. And Hinkley is just not getting what he needs to get out of that playing group.
Well,
the issue for me is that everybody keeps quoting that kick away from the grand final, that 2014 year, as being the standard. This is where Port is at. That year is an aberration, and the past 2 years and the 2 years prior to it prove that it is an aberration. It is not their standard. They got lucky, to me. There was some results that went their way. And Jars and Louis pulled it out again this week going, but they were, it just annoys me when they keep talking about how they made final and they nearly made a grand final.
Well, we did the same thing, Nikki, didn't we? We did the same thing, and we were a kick away from a grand final as well. But that line kept getting trotted out. But what we did is that we acted on it and we sacked the coach.
They also had a really good run with injuries that year, and everyone was talking up how good Burgess was, and they've been terrible with injuries since.
Well, they were blessed that year, not only just in the injury factor, but also in the draw. They had a very soft draw, and they also had this very peculiar situation that every team they played, if you go back and look at it, you'll find that every time, just prior to every match, when they were about to play a team, that particular team had about two or three of its stars out injured, and they had this magical run right through the minor round where they were always playing undermanned teams, and they're also playing on a very soft draw. So it really did raise a superb point there that year was not really their standard. That was the one that wasn't the standard, and the other four are.
Folks, and just moving on, there's before we leave AFL News, there's another team I really want to discuss. This side was described by Ian Robertson on AFL 360. For those who don't live in Melbourne and don't understand VFL football, and he made this quite clear, and I thought that was quite reasonable in the circumstances. He said, for those who live outside of Victoria, I need to describe to you this particular side. They are a side who, for all people that follow football in Victoria, they are like your drunk uncle. They are like your drunk uncle who quite often, is unemployed, who will come and just, stumble around. You love him and you just you want him to do good, but he just keeps falling over himself and he keeps ending up, paro on your couch. And you just hope that he'll pull himself together one day. And when he does get a job, the whole family just wants to get behind him and see him make good. I speak, of course, of Richmond. And I thought it was a very, very apt description. And this description was applied to Richmond a couple of years ago when they won, I think it was 6 or 7 games on the trot and made finals. And everyone in Victoria was getting excited. What I'm asking is, have Richmond awoken from what has been a drunken, drinking, binge stupor of 2016, and can they just make a little bit of a mess of teams jockeying in the 8 for position over these last 3 rounds?
Well, my opinion is with them, is that they are massive underperformers. So they are capable of playing some very good football, but you can't rely on it. And I think, the description of the team is pretty good, but the one you just read out there, Pete. And, if the right Richmond turns up, they could beat some of the contenders that they're about to play. And let's hope they do. But also, they can also go there and get their asses belted as well. So there are 2 Richmonds, there's no doubt about it.
Well, they've got Geelong and Sydney. I'm not quite sure about their third game. Can anyone just remember offhand?
Sounds of silence.
No idea.
Well, it'll take me a while to look it up, so have a chat amongst yourselves.
Well, even if they just beat those 2, that would be good enough for us. Our aim obviously would be to finish second, and if Richmond or whoever can beat some of the contenders that are also vying for that second position, it'd be absolutely beautiful.
That third game is against the Saints. So they come up against Geelong next week, then St Kilda and Sydney in the last round. So if they were to get onto a little bit of a roll, they could do a little bit of damage. And they've certainly got the players, let's be honest.
Well, as I said, they've always been massive underperformers, and when they click, they look very, very good. But they also know how to lose games at the end, as they've shown many, many times. But they are capable of playing good footy. And let's hope that they're going to save the best for last and they knock off a couple of those sides.
All right, any other issues from around the AFL, Nikki?
Well, there is the lovely match review panel from this week, but I think they may get a bit of a run in the Cockwomble Numbnut of the Week award because they once again proved free kick Hawthorn. I think to most supporters who were not Hawthorn supporters, with the results that came out there. And the fact, I'm still surprised that Rioli was not cited for the tackle that he made. And yet it made the top 10 plays of the week on the AFL. To me, that was a dangerous tackle. He didn't sling the player, but he picked him up by his legs and dropped him on his back, which whacked his head into the ground. And that player had no way of protecting themselves. Isn't that the definition of a dangerous tackle?
Was it actually a tackle or a charge, Nikki? The one that he got cited for?
Oh, that was the charge. He did a tackle later on where he grabbed, and it was the old rugby one you used to see where they grab the legs, lift them up in the air, and drop them on their head almost.
Well, yeah, I can't remember that one, but the one that he did get off, I thought he Well, if he was wearing Crow's Guernsey, he wouldn't have got off, that's for certain. And if he was wearing a lot of other teams' Guernseys, he wouldn't have got off. Mitchell, I wasn't totally surprised that he got off because the other guy, Watts, was actually clawing at his face a bit. And while he went and threw a bit of a punch at him, he did have a semi-open hand. So I wasn't totally surprised that he got off.
Just quickly before we leave, Wayne's World signing in. Good to hear from you, Wayne's World. Just asking the question about the issue of the draft pick for each club that hasn't made the finals for 3 consecutive years. Any thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, throw it out.
Moving along.
Yeah, otherwise you're just rewarding mediocrity.
There we are, Wayne's World. You've had your approximately 3 seconds
for
fame.
Me, they need to fix up their development areas. If they can't get their players coming through, etc., or whatever, they need to get better people in their development.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, that's a key. That is the key these days in terms of a team being successful. That they all go to the draft. They've all got access to the not all the same players, but in the first round. But after that, they do, and the ability to spot the right player and then to develop that player to the maximum ability. That's how you get up amongst the big boys. And failure to do so consigns you down to the bottom.
Well, giving them extra players, if they still can't develop them properly, we're just going to have more duds going through the system.
Correct.
All right, moving on from the news, I think we'll have a little bit of a look at the Brisbane Lions game on the weekend. And Phoenix, are there any highlights this evening that we should be aware of?
No.
Good. Moving along then, let's hop straight into the Brisbane game. I wasn't at the game. I was sitting watching the game at the beautiful Royal Hotel Horsham. Please don't anybody ask me what I was doing at the Royal Hotel in Horsham on Saturday night, just gone. But was anybody at the game? Was anybody there to give us a little bit of atmosphere?
Yeah, but I'll let Nikki do it because she's not as biased as I.
I'm trying to eat dinner. Thanks for that, Macca. It really was a game of, we're playing some witches' hats that are wearing white, blue and maroon. They did give a bit of fight every so often. What we know, Macca and I did talk about on Sunday was what we noticed was that there was a definite practice going on by the team, particularly you could see it in the first quarter that we were very much doing get the ball to sort of centre wing, lowering the eyes and hitting up that target about 40 metres out of goal. That seemed to be what the team was out there to practice. The Crouch boys did try and do these little sky-high dinky kicks. So I think one did it, so the other one had to go, and then they both realised, oh, hang on, no, we're practicing this other thing. Overall, I mean, what can you really take out of a game like that? Rob came in, played well. Cam Ellis came in, played well, played a lot more up forward. I think Douglas really needs to be looking over his shoulder because Cam offered more than Douglas did. Talia was having fun on Shaki, teaching him how to actually play the game. What else was there, Macca?
I love how Pike called Ellis Yeoman Curly in his presser. That was great.
Yep, that's his nickname around the club. Rob. Yep. Well, Rob was to me, he was an outstanding success as a fill-in for Jacobs, and from my point of view, I'd like to see Jacobs left behind for the trip to Perth. To take no chances with him, so he's ready for next week, and give Rob the giant task of taking on Sandilands. I mean, he will certainly lack the experience, but out of it he will gain experience, a very invaluable experience. And the guy's got a lot of fight and grunt in him. He doesn't finish once the ball hits the ground, and he does follow up. I really like him, and I think he's got a real future. And we've got to make sure that we keep him because if you look at every club, most of their ruckmen come from another club, and they were developed as juniors in one club and then snaffled by somebody else, as we did with Jacobs, for example. And so I think somewhere down the track we're going to have to start playing two ruckmen, to make sure that we keep the guy.
Macca, I absolutely agree. And I thought that Riley O'Brien was the story of the night from what I could see. I think he had, from memory, 15-odd possessions. He must have had 24 or 25-odd hit-outs. Kicked a goal, which was, of course, very special, seeing all the players get around him. It was a very, very good debut, admittedly under also opposition that was also inexperienced. But nevertheless, a very, very good debut. And I think, Macca, you're absolutely right in a few comments you made through the week. There must be a succession plan, and I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a succession plan for Rob, and I think that sending him to Perth this week will be a good thing, because I think that what will happen is that he'll get pounded by Sandy, and I think that he'll come back stiff and sore and bruised, and he'll realise that at the age of 20, that clubs offering the carrot of him playing 22 games for their club may not necessarily be in his best physical interest at this point in his career, and that he may well be better off graduated development over the next 2 or 3 years to the point where he is, playing full seasons of football as a first ruck, at the age of sort of 23, 24, when he's fully developed and used to the rigours of AFL football. So I think that would be a very, very good benefit of the weekend. Yes, Nikki, you're calling me.
I am, because on that point, if you listen to his post-match press conference he did with Katrina Gill, they asked him about that, and he talked about blowing up in the first quarter, that after his first little time on the field, he just completely blew up, because the step up from the SNFL to the AFL is so big. He then had a little chat with Clarkey about how to position himself better, how to conserve himself a bit better in the way, and then we changed it up a little bit to help him through the rest of the game. So he's already, in that post-conference, straight after the game, he's already acknowledging he knows he's not quite ready to play a full season yet.
Excellent point, Nikki. And I think that also is an issue. And I think that on the expanses of Subi, he will certainly get yet another test for his fitness. And I think that he's obviously a very, very intelligent man. I mean, he got a ridiculous ATAR, studies medical science. Very, very intelligent man, and he will know that it will be in the best. I think that it will be in the best interest of Riley O'Brien to develop and to just have a graduated introduction to the rigours of AFL football. And I think that he will know that the carrots that come from other clubs offering him 22 or 23 games necessarily be in his developmental interest.
Yep, totally agree with that. And a couple of other big, more interesting points that came from the game. Brad Crouch coming right back into his very best form, I thought. He had a lot more time once he got the ball, and he was trying to do a lot more with it than he has been in previous weeks. He's still not quite there with the disposal, but he's getting very, very close. And I think that by the time the finals come along, he will be in ripping form. So I hope he doesn't get any more injuries, because I think he's got some big games coming up. And it was, as for our defence, I thought the defence was absolutely outstanding in terms of Talia leading it. There was Laird, there was Smith. You go right through them, name by name, and they all performed beautifully. And I just thought that I know we were playing witches' hats, but at least we did give the witches' hats a good kick.
Very true, and certainly a little bit of payback for things that we've got from Brisbane in the early 2000s. Danos, were you going to contribute there?
I was just going to say, I know that on Sunday, Nikki and Phoenix talked about Ellis Yeoman sort of playing half midfield, half forward in the Douglas role. But does anyone think that perhaps with his height, Ellis Yeoman almost played a little bit of the McGovern role as well?
He he could, but he hasn't got that same magical quality that McGovern's got. Cameron Ellis-Yolmen he's a good footballer. Don't get me wrong, good footballer, but he does the predictable. McGovern does the unpredictable. He just pulls out something magical when you don't really expect it. So, yeah, he could play the role, but it wouldn't be quite the same because McGovern just gets it by surprise every so often.
I read quite a bit through the week, to my surprise. A lot of people pointing the finger at Rory Atkins, and I know, and I'll put my hand up, I know that I'm not necessarily objective. I know he's my favourite player. But I was very, very surprised to read people talking about, slowing up and looking tired and looking like he needs a rest. And then I think back to the game, and I think of him, coming through half forward on his right foot, if you don't mind, and spearing passes to Tom Lynch over 40 metres. And I look at his stats, and he gets 25 possessions at 80% disposal efficiency. He has 8 inside 50s. I'm thinking, are our expectations just, I guess, of the way that he plays, are our expectations so high now that a game such as that, is looked upon as being a poor game? Is that what's happening?
Well, I wouldn't call it a poor game. I'm one of those people that probably do.
Well, people. Sorry to interrupt, but people were saying he had a poor game.
No, not a poor game, but I was critical on Sunday night 2 or 3 times when he could have delivered the ball and he insisted on doing one of the side steps because he loves doing that little trick, but he got himself into trouble by doing it and ended up having to either lose the ball or get his disposal suffered for it or got himself into a poor situation. And that's my only criticism. I think he's a magical player in terms of his abilities. And no, I wouldn't say it was a poor game, but it's just that little thing he's just got to refine a little bit is to, when he wants to do sell the candy and that, just to do it at the right time, not every time.
First, Lever is definitely a better candy man than Atkins. And second, let's not forget that Atkins has only played 27 games.
Good point, and I know I was very harsh on him in terms of picking that out. But if we're going to be a premiership side, you do have to highlight things like that and remove them from your game.
The problem with Atkins, though, is because he is quite advanced in his thinking and his decision making. That is his real elite quality. He does tend to hang on to the ball, and I think I think it becomes an occupational hazard that he does hang on to the ball a little bit longer than other players do because he doesn't necessarily go for it. You compare him to, say, Matt Crouch, who will get the ball, give the ball. It's an instinctive thing, and regardless of, quite often it doesn't matter where the next player is. He'll just dish it off to a player who is close. Whereas Atkins will think a little bit outside the square, and he'll try and buy himself that little bit of extra time, and he'll try and create. So I think that does tend to be a little bit of an occupational hazard, and I'd hate to see him take that out of his game purely because he got caught holding the ball 1 or 2 times. I mean, really,
or 3 times.
Well, 3 times was it? Well, really, I mean, at the end of the day, when you compare that to the amount of how constructive his play can be. I think that is probably a little bit of an overreaction.
I would say if you said he had a poor game, yes, I would agree that's an overreaction. But that you're right about he's got that magical quality, but he did overuse it. That's my point. In fact, the week before he drastically overused it, and he did refine it somewhat this week. And look, he had only played 25 games, and he will get better and better. And know when to do it and when not to do it. And I suppose the only way you learn is by experience. But he did get caught a couple of times.
All right, let's move on.
Okay, any further chat? Any further chat about the Brisbane game, or should we move on? No,
There's not much to say there. You're right.
All right, guys. All right. Well, let's. How about we take a little bit of a cock womble and talk about the cock wombling num nut of the week. Nikki.
Well, there's a little bit of Hawthorn flavour for this week for the cock-wombling numbnut of the week. So I'm putting up for nomination Jason Dunstall and also the match review panel regarding certain penalties that were minimised regarding particularly Cyril Rioli. Now, Dunstall is going to cop it for listening on the couch on Monday night, and he was talking about, well, there's Alex Rance, and then there is possibly Rory Thompson, who's getting like him, and they're it for the top defenders. And Jared Healy piped up with, well, what about Daniel Talia? And so did David King. And Dunstall's reply was, well, he's just a stopper. Well, I'm sorry, Dunstall, but isn't that what you want your fullback to mainly be a stopper? Because you can talk about Rance as much as you like, but he gets his ass kicked by Taylor Walker and Eddie Betts. So how many players can beat Daniel? Probably the only one is a certain full forward Sydney, formerly at Hawthorn, and he's the only one, and I think the most he's actually ever kicked on Talia is 5, whereas Rance has had decent bags kicked against him.
Can't argue with what you're saying, Nikki. I did hear that comment, and I was quite disgusted with it because if you had a look at Talia's stats for the game against Brisbane, Talia was quite an attacking defender, and he did say in his post-match interview that he was making very big efforts to be an attacking defender and relying on the other guys to back him up and look after his man. So, as usual, Dunstall was wrong.
Well, Nikki,
so what do we think?
I just want to add in there that I travelled to Horsham on the weekend and I looked at the weather forecast for the Saturday, and the forecast was partially cloudy, and with a maximum temperature of 18 degrees, with sunny periods. And out at the Horsham Saints game on Saturday afternoon with some friends, I noticed that it was an absolutely perfect day, partially cloudy, a little bit of sunshine, and around about 18 degrees. So just want to give a really big tick to the bomb for this week.
That went surprisingly in a direction I didn't think it was going to go.
Well, you've got to give credit where credit's due, Nikki.
Yes, very true. So what do you reckon, match review panel or Jason Dunstall?
MRP for me.
MRP for me. I thought it was a disgraceful decision. I saw the footage of Sam Mitchell punching Jack Watts, and some of the garbage that I've heard over the weeks for excusing Sam Mitchell, who's a dirty player, and they're a dirty team, and the rubbish that comes out of the Victorian media defending this guy and defending Hawthorn players. And then tonight I've got to sit there and look at Jordan Lewis up on TV carrying on about the way that North Melbourne play and the fact that they brought dirty tactics to the Hawthorn game makes me ill. And so absolutely the MRP are the cock-wobbling numbnuts of the week.
Love that song.
Very, very nice work, Nikki. I thought you covered it very, very well this week. No doubt about it. All right.
You're welcome.
All right. So that leaves us to now have a little bit of a look forward to Sunday twilight and have a bit of a chat about the upcoming Fremantle Dockers game. Perhaps we could start with some ins and outs.
Oh, yeah, from our team? Yeah, well, I'd say that not too many changes. Tomo will obviously be coming back into the side. That's one. He's a certainty. Who else?
Well, Mitch McGovern will come straight back.
McGovern.
Oh, sorry, he was arrested, so he will come back in. So I'd say just those two. Of course, that leaves the question of who are the outs, and
probably Seedsman.
Yes, I think you got one there. Yep.
And I read somewhere earlier that apparently Pike was flagging possible more resting for the next couple of weeks. So have we got any older players? Douglas?
It could be Douglas. It could well be Douglas.
I'm going to take a punt at Dougie. I think that he might be due a rest as an experienced player. I think that would work pretty well if we were to take out Seed, rest Douglas, and then bring back in Thompson and McGovern. I think that would work quite well.
I agree.
I would think they'd like to have another look at Cameron Ellis-Young, and I thought he did very, very well for his first game for the year, and I think they'd probably like to have another look at him. So I think he would stay in. So those two changes you mentioned there, Danos, that would work.
And as Vardy Magic points out on the chat, McGovern will most certainly play given he's West Australian.
Yep, good point.
And so what are our thoughts as to how the game might transpire?
Well, if it's the usual Fremantle battle, which West Coast had the same situation with them last weekend, they seem to scratch and claw and hold their own to some degree in the first half and then can't maintain it in the second half. And they are trying to play a bit more attacking footy, but it's not in their nature. It doesn't come naturally because they've always been playing this different game plan that Ross has over there. And he's obviously trying to change at the moment. But when you change midstream and mid-year as they have done, it makes it very difficult. And I would expect that it would be... Look, if we were in front at half time, I'd be very happy, but I don't know whether that will be the situation. But I would expect us to be too good in the second half, and that we should prevail and probably win by about half a dozen goals.
They were very much playing play on at all costs at the start of that Freo West Coast game, which got West Coast caught by surprise. Now, we've seen it. So we know what they're probably going to try to do. And teams that try and do that against us, if we can turn it over, we're going to punish them on the way back. They didn't play too badly, but West Coast, as Phoenix has said in the chat, they weren't that good either. So I don't see this as a danger game at all. I think we'll account for them fairly easily. It might be a little bit close at the start, but our fitness and also our understanding of our game plan is going to hold us instead.
What do you think there's a margin, Nikki?
Well, we did talk about that, and what is it? You guys thought 10 goals. I didn't think it would quite get to there.
I'm thinking a minimum of 6 anyhow.
Yeah, I think it'll be comfortable. The reason I say that is because Fremantle have been quite up and down this year, and there seems to have been some games that I just get the sense that they've targeted. I think that they targeted last week because it was a derby, and I think it's important for the Perth market and the Perth audience that there is a competitive derby. And I watched the game from start to finish. And in the first half, they absolutely threw the kitchen sink at West Coast, and they were at times quite impressive. Their effort was absolutely first class, but from about halfway through the third quarter, they were out on their feet. They had put in a ton of effort into trying to make that a competitive and relatively close game, but in the end, as I said, they were out on their feet, and I just have a feeling that they targeted that particular game to. I mean, I know all players go out and give effort, each game, but I just have a sense that they really targeted that game as really, really trying to get a good competitive performance in. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to repeat that this week, and I have a funny feeling that the Crows may well come away with quite a comfortable win.
Well, I'd say that that's a pretty good description of it, but I still wouldn't be surprised if they put in a good effort in the first half. Maybe not good enough to be in front, but I think you're quite right. They really did. And they didn't cave in mentally. I think they just caved in physically, didn't they, in that second half?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's all it was, Macca.
Yeah, so I think if we keep playing our game, and as Nicky was quite right, if they're going to attack at all costs and almost blindly, that's how we do get our score on the slingshot. So I don't see it as a danger game either. I think that if we produce our normal game and they produce their normal game, well then, yeah, I'd say six should be the minimum that we would win by, and maybe more.
They have absolutely zero forward structure. Even with all the effort that they were putting in, they have zero forward structure. I mean, they got 2 goals from Tom Sheridan, who was tagging Gaff, and he dragged him forward. So 2 out of 9 goals came from their tagger in the midfield. They have absolutely zero forward movement. It is, I mean, they've never been great, even in their best days. They weren't great up forward, but things are really, really shot up there now. And so I just can't see how they can kick 10 goals. Looking back through their scores over the year, I think they've had 3 occasions where they've hit 100 points in 19 games or something, 18 games. They've had 3 occasions where they've hit 100 points, and that was against Essendon, Brisbane, and I think it was Gold Coast when the Gold Coast were basically a NEFL team. So, against any kind of decent opposition, they are scoring around about 9 or 10 goals at best. And of course, law of averages says that regardless of who we play or where we play, we'll score 100 points. And so I'd be very, very surprised if the margin is anything under, around about, as you say, Macca. I certainly wouldn't expect anything less than 6 goals, and I would think it really should push up to over 10, I believe.
Yeah, I do think that's quite possible, and maybe even more if the game fizzles out like they did last week. But I'm saying that from an acceptable point of view, I think if we don't win by 6, I think we haven't really played as well as we should.
Yeah, I think that's fair comment. I don't think there's going to be any tantrums as there has been in the last few weeks, me included, in terms of 100-point. I don't think anybody's expecting us to go over there and win by 100 points, but I think that there would certainly be an expectation. I think that we could win comfortably and have reasonable percent. I wouldn't expect them to score significantly against us, and so I would hope that we can, push another 3, 4, 5% onto the lead we already have over GWS, who should have a more competitive game against West Coast at home.
Although their home games, they've managed to blow out a couple of teams. They did Hawthorn. They beat Geelong. They beat Collingwood by a long way. So they're quite capable. And West Coast is nowhere near the form they were in at the start of the year. So it's possible that they could also get a big win as well. Could
do. All right, shall we have a quick look at the AFL round in total? We start off with Western Bulldogs playing Collingwood. Can't see Collingwood getting a win there. Scott Pendlebury looks to miss, I think, with an ankle injury. And I think that Darcy Moore will probably also miss with a hamstring. Impressive, the Bulldogs last week under pressure to get the goods or get the points against North Melbourne. Can't see if they win. Just looking at the Bulldogs, if they provided they win this one, they've only got Essendon and Fremantle to come. This should guarantee them a home final. So I would think it's a very, very important game for them to win. I can't see them dropping this one.
No, and much as I hate their coach, I have to say I admire the team in terms of the way it really puts in, and it is a bit of a never say die type team, and you have to admire their efforts even under adversity.
Then we have, trying to think some of the other games that we've got upcoming. Anybody?
Is GWS West Coast?
Yeah, GWS West Coast. Anybody can anybody see West Coast winning that one?
Nope.
No.
No, I'd love them to do it, but they won't.
Oh, Melbourne Port.
Now that's going to be an interesting game.
Melbourne should thump Port Adelaide.
Yeah, they should.
Where's the game being played?
Oh, it's at Adelaide Oval. They're not going to thump them at
Here.
Adelaide Oval.
Oh, that'll be great if they did.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it... They may not thump them, but I reckon they might beat them.
Hawthorn Kangaroos.
Now, this is a big game. This is a huge game.
I'd love the Roos to win it.
Well, I'd love the Roos to
I
win it
can
for
see.
a couple of reasons, because obviously if they win that opens up top two for us, but also it puts the final bullet in Port Adelaide as well.
Oh, Port!
Yes.
I don't think Port's got a chance now, but I think Hawthorn will win this by 10 goals.
Well, I don't know that Hawthorn are travelling all that well.
I think
They're
North
travelling
Melbourne
better
are
than
travelling a
North,
lot worse than Hawthorn are.
I agree, Macca. I just think that they're a little bit wonky at the moment. And I think that Hawthorn have been a little bit wonky all year. They've been very, very fortunate to get away with 3 or 4 games by under a goal, and hence their percentage is poor. I just got a funny feeling that they're just going to, as they come to the line, and they're just a little bit wonky. They've lost Stratton for a month, and they'll lose Sicily to suspension. So a couple of big outs for Hawthorn. I just wonder whether this might be the opportunity that North need to steal up their spot.
Well, I think one thing for certain that North will do, they'll put a tagger onto Mitchell, because the last couple of weeks Mitchell's had a tagger on him, and he struggled to get a kick, and as a result of that, Hawthorn lost a lot of drive.
Well, fingers crossed. Hopefully North can get the points, because that will be a double whammy, which will be just superb. Brisbane and Carlton, who cares? Sydney and St Kilda. Now, this is an interesting game. I think that Sydney are really bullying teams at the moment, and I think that they'll probably win. But at Etihad, do we give St Kilda some chance?
Yes.
I'd love to say yes, but watching that Sydney midfield, God, they've got a good midfield. I mean, they've got 4 guns in their midfield. Look, if you can even just sort of break even somewhat, then I think you've got every chance of beating Sydney. But, gee, it's a terrific midfield.
It certainly is.
That almost might be the... I think that might be the game of the round.
It's an outstanding midfield, Macca, and let me tell you that on a first thing on a Saturday morning, when you've been on the beers on a Friday night, and the boys get around and say, "Look, we need a bit of advice for our bets. Who are we going to go for in terms of possessions?" Well, you can either go Mitchell, Kennedy, Hanbury, or Parker. Who do you think, Pete? There is a very, very, very difficult choice to be made there. Let me tell you.
Yeah, that's the point I'm actually getting at, because I mean, I've got them in my dream team, and they just perform out of sight for you.
Yeah, very difficult. Nikki, you think that the Saints can get up?
I think they're a chance. They're really going to have to play well across all lines, but we've seen them do it a couple of times this year already. I mean, you guys know I'm a little bit bullish about the Saints, so I quite like the way they play, and I think they've got some very decent talent coming through there as well. And Richardson's got them playing a very winning kind of game plan, and Etihad probably suits them a little bit better than it does suit Sydney. Sydney haven't performed that well at Etihad.
Well, let's keep the fingers crossed, because a St Kilda win will certainly keep the pressure on Port and keep them down, and it will obviously notice how incredibly beneficial it'll be to the Crows. And yet, my first instinct thought is to how do we keep Port out of the 8. Very sad, I know, but it'll be a great help, obviously, for the Crows to have Sydney get rolled.
Absolutely.
Essendon Gold Coast, well, that's a really nothing game. The other interesting game of the round, I think, is Richmond and Geelong at the MCG. Any thoughts on this game?
Well, it can depend which Richmond turns up, doesn't it? Because the Richmond that can really play its very best football could worry the life out of Geelong and possibly even beat them. If it's the dud Richmond, well, then, of course, Geelong could almost get percentage. So I thought Richmond was getting close to the real Richmond last week, and I'd love them to repeat that episode and roll Geelong. Deep down, I don't think they will, but it is a remote possibility.
Nikki and Dan?
Well, for me, it's how many, as I just said on the chat, how many Richmond players know that their careers are on the line. They're actually going to pull their finger out and play.
Do you think that's
For me?
Sorry, Dennis, go on.
For me, I think that it's about how much Geelong's going to win by, as opposed to whether Richmond can win.
Dan, you're tipping some very, very big wins across the board on the weekend. No close ones for you?
Tipping weekend, I think. I don't think so.
But Dan, I thought Geelong were very ordinary against Essendon last week. I mean, seriously, Essendon just scratched and clawed and kept trying, and I thought that they did a very, very good job. And the margin probably didn't even reflect the way that the game was played. So I wouldn't have been too happy if I was a coach at Geelong, quite frankly. And well, that actually might work in their favour and wake them up for this week. I don't know.
Will Richmond play the same way that Essendon played, though? For a lot of the game, they only had 2 or 3 forwards. I don't think Richmond will do that.
I would not tip what Richmond would do any time.
Well, that's a good point. But I don't think that. I think that they're going to play a much more regular structure, 5 or 6 forwards, and it's just going to make the forward line open for Geelong.
The thing that with Richmond is that they do have a bit of star power down there, and it's ridiculous that I think that they've got themselves in the position that they're in. And when you think that they've got Jack Riewoldt, when you think that they've got Dusty Martin, Trent Cotchin, Alex Rance, and a number of other players that you could run through who are quality AFL players, it seems crazy that they are in the position that they're in. Yet they are. And you just don't know. They're a fluky kind of a team, Richmond, aren't they? Don't forget that on the MCG they beat Sydney this season on the last kick of the day, and so they do have the capacity. They do have the capacity to play good football, and so it'll be a very, very interesting game. I think you would have to tip Geelong, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I think this is what I was alluding to earlier in the program, that Richmond are just that kind of fluky team that may end up just getting a couple of results in the last part of the season.
I think what sums up Richmond best this season is that they've played Hampson in front of Marriage.
He's cooked.
What sane team would play? Even if Marriage is cooked, it's still a 10 times better player than Hampson.
Well, I'm amazed that Hampson's even playing league footy. I have to agree with you, but Marriage wasn't doing much when any chances he has had. So I think they're just probably a little bit scud in that area, I think.
Marriage only played 1 game this year. He's been playing reserves the whole year.
I know, but he played that 1 game and then he played a very ordinary game and he got flicked straight away.
Well, it certainly promises to be an interesting round of football. There is a number of opportunities there for the Crows to be able to slip into one of those coveted top 2 positions. The North Melbourne Hawthorn game we'll watch closely. We'll watch the GWS West Coast game very, very closely. And, of course, the Geelong Richmond game we'll watch very closely as well.
St Kilda Sydney as well, mate.
And the St Kilda Sydney game as well. So there's probably 4 games there that hold genuine interest for the neutral supporter to have a look and see how we can benefit from those results. So certainly a very, very interesting round of football. All right, that just about brings us to the end of another Tuesday Night Live of the Crowcast. been wonderful to have your company. Thank you very much for those people who have messaged in and raised topics for us to discuss. We thank very much our panel tonight, Macca, Nikki and Danos. Thanks very much, guys.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Pete.
Always great to have you along. Always great to have your input. And we also thank as always, Phoenix, who is pushing and pulling the buttons in the background and making sure that this little piece of radio gets across. So thanks very much, mate. Always appreciate your help. All right, that's it for another Tuesday Night Live. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, we have got the Thursday night preview of the Crows Fremantle game. And on Sunday evening, there'll be the wrap-up of all the things that happened in the AFL on the weekend, including the big game from Subiaco between the Crows and Fremantle. So we look forward to having you company in then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye.